6:32, we'll call this meeting to order. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Paul, Tasha second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the meeting, or the minutes are approved. First time on the agenda is birth to 3. Steve, you want to kick it off?
I think I'm going to let Amy kick it off.
Yeah, so tonight we are going to discuss two topics, birth to 3 and pre-K. We have here with us Jay Beaver, who's going to talk about preschool. And then as far as birth to 3.
DJ Beaver.
Tina Hoffman and Tracy Lieberman, regional
You
administration.
guys are calling us everywhere.
I know, we're everywhere. Got groupies now, you know.
And then I'm sorry, it's Kay Schieffer and Beth Mcnatt.
Okay,
Remembering which one is which.
I'm Beth Mcnatt.
Okay. And so they are heavily involved with our birth to 3 kiddos who eventually potentially end up in ICCSD or 3-year classrooms. So I'm going to provide some information and background with the work that's done at that time and then that transition as for those kids that are eligible as 3-year-olds that come into our district. I'll turn it over to you ladies.
All right, thanks. So I'm Beth Mcnatt. I'm an itinerant preschool teacher with our early access team. I do more of the early communication, cognitive development, and behavior, social emotional at that time, kind of jack of all trades for little people. So I'm going to do a brief summary of our early access. Then Kay's going to do a kind of overview of our 3 to 5, and then we'll open up for questions after that. So, early access services are for infants and toddlers aged birth to 3. It is funded through the Department of Health, Department of Human Services, Department of Education, and Child Health Specialty Clinics. So we are connected with all of those services, and of course, obviously that helps us connect with University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. Services through early access, we provide all of these. Not a lot of the time you think it's therapy, but not necessarily. So we provide speech, vision, occupational therapy, nutrition, communication and language, cognitive or learning. We have an autism resource team, which not any other grant or area education agency in the state has, but we do. We also do physical therapy. We do hearing screens, and then a lot of times we'll go in and do multidisciplinary for children who are multiply involved. How you qualify for these services, children with a 25% delay in one or more areas. So we go in and do an initial screen, and then we do a second evaluation with another form of, not necessarily a test, but an assessment. And with one of those evaluations, you must have a 25% delay to qualify for that. Or some screens will not come back with that 25% delay, but if there's a high probability for a developmental delay, such as a child has a health concern, or they are a child with a health concern, like a lot of times we'll get children with strokes, we'll get children with health conditions that come back, and there's a real high probability of a developmental delay that will come back later. We will serve them because we want to catch it before something happens. Services are free and they're voluntary to families. So what does early access services look like for families? A lot of times families will get early access and it will look different than private therapy. So what does that mean? So it happens in your natural environment. It happens in your everyday activities and routines, and we use a coaching model for families and for caregivers. It happens at home, it happens in the community, it happens in child care centers, it can happen at church, it can happen at grandma's house, and we use everyday activities and routines such as hand washing, toothbrushing, play, going outside and feeding the dog, running the dishwasher, all of those kinds of things. How can we use language, learning, physical therapy, using the stairs, fine motor activities in everyday activities? What the research tells us is families are much more likely to follow through with the therapies if it's things they already do every day and it's in their natural environment. So here's a really good example. If a family needs to work on tummy time, That's really hard if we just say, you need to put them on their tummy, do that 2 times a day, and your child's already crying and screaming. That's not very fun. But if you can say, if it's a child who's still diapering, that the child gets changed maybe 6 times a day, you can just say, how about if we turn them on their tummy, if it's in a safe space, even on the floor, you walk away, you're gonna go throw that diaper away, and you're gonna come back. If we can get 20 to 30 seconds of that tummy time, 6 to 8 times a day, and we're gonna build up tolerance over time, that's in a daily routine. It's not for very long. We're gonna come back. The chances of success in that rate is higher, and parents feel more successful. It's a good example of that. 3 most common reasons for children that referred are delays in speech and communication, behavior, or overall or global delays. How to make a referral to early access is to just phone or contact people at the area education agency. Contact one of us. Anyone can make a referral, a parent, a physician, a school person, DHS, or other agencies. We prefer always that a parent knows you're making that referral, because once a referral is made, a family will be contacted. They legally have to be contacted within 2 days. So it's always hard for us, especially when a parent gets called and they're like, I didn't know anyone was, that happens a lot with physicians. They don't know what's happening, so it's always much easier. So as a child approaches the age of 3, usually at about 6 months, we start talking with families about what's going to happen after we're done. On a lot of levels, sometimes we will just help a family phase out. They have been doing really great. They're making really good progress. They are no longer have a 25% delay. Maybe we're just kind of helping them phase out of those services. Maybe we are suspecting a disability. So we talk about what that process is going to look like, and we're going to bring that early childhood team in. Maybe they still have some delays, but they're not significant enough, so we're going to get them in touch with other community resources like Head Start, Tot Time, those kinds of things. So we start working on that. Kay's going to go into that process as we get closer, or as on the next slide. So as we get closer, we start talking for about 6 months out what that looks like with them. So they have a good idea and that they're part of that process. I think that's the key part of early access, is we aren't in charge of it, that they're part of our team. They make the decisions about what their child is learning and how their child is learning it. And so that's kind of the difference between private therapy and early access, is what are my child's goals, how do I want them to learn it, where do I want them to learn it, and then we just provide them the best strategies for that. So. Next is Kay. She's going to wander.
And I'm the Beth of the early childhood team. And so what I'm going to talk to you about here is how the process of Child Find works for children between ages 3 and 5. And Child Find is that process for the legally mandated process for identifying children with disabilities. The process is available to children from ages 3 through age 21. And as Beth just mentioned, when a child is has received early access services, we actually start the evaluation process when the child is 2 years, 9 months old. So we want that IEP in place by the time the child turns 3. As with early access, the process is available through a referral process. Parents can talk to the AEA about their concerns about their child. They can direct refer. But we also get referrals from daycares, community preschools, and medical providers. As with early access, we always want to make sure that whoever's making the referral for Child Find has spoken to the parent and has parent permission to do that. Know also, of course, that Child Find happens in district preschools as well. So children who are in the universal preschools in the elementary buildings also have Child Find services available to them. When I talk about our team, I'm talking about the team of people who actually pursue this Child Find process. So they screen children for possible developmental disabilities or developmental delays. and they help facilitate some part of the process until an evaluation is completed and a child is, an IEP is in place. So for children who have received early access, the people who are actually providing the information that's used in the evaluation are the early access providers. So those who have been working with the family, and that would be the teachers, the speech-language pathologist, the occupational therapist, and physical therapist, and the autism resource team. I forgot to put them in that list. And then for children who have already turned 3, who are being referred from the home, the daycare, or the preschool, there is another team, the early childhood evaluation team, that includes myself, an education specialist, as well as 1.5 speech-language therapists and a school psychologist. I wanted to show you just a little bit about the caseload for children who have been referred for child find between the ages of 3 and 5. Just over the last 5 years, you can see that we've had some variability in the total number of screenings and evaluations that we've conducted throughout an academic year. So 5 years ago, we were as high as 252 children screened or evaluated in the course of an academic year. In 2015-16, we were almost that high again at 225. It's highly variable. It really, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. It's really just a question of the needs of a population that move through. I think that some of the bumps that we've had there in 2011-12 and 2015-16 have really been due to an increase in early access numbers. It's not like there was a big change in the population in Iowa City. It was just the coincidence of the needs of a very early population. And you'll see that as we look over the last 5 years, the breakdown between children who are screened for child find in early childhood is pretty consistent in that the early access population is anywhere from 20 to 25% of the entire population that's screened for child find. So that's been pretty steady. I can't really, again, I don't know what it is that's controlling those parameters, but it's been a pretty steady proportion over the last 5 years. What I really want to convey today is that the process of identifying young children who have disabilities is exactly the same process that we use for children who are in K-12. We follow the exact same process. We answer the same questions for these young children. So just like children who are in K-12, when we're looking at a preschool-age child, we're still looking at a comprehensive evaluation, looking at their health, hearing and vision, behavior, academic needs, communication, and adaptive needs. And we're asking the same questions as we try to determine whether there is actually an educational delay or an educational disability. Has the child had access and opportunity to learn the things that we expect them to learn? What are the ecological factors at play? What's the magnitude of the discrepancy? How do we define and understand their educational needs, which also includes the question, what kinds of supports does this child need to make progress? And in early childhood, just like in K-12, we are held to promoting equity among students of color. So we're extremely attuned to those ecological factors. We're extremely attuned to the history of the child and try to take all of those things into account. One of the things that's really been beneficial to us over the last couple of years is the increased availability the increased availability of professional development for us, particularly in the area of ELL, and helping us understand the factors of dual language learners and shaping our expectations of how we expect them to learn. This is just a slide to give you a taste of, it's really, I realize the legends here are probably not the best legends to put on here, but this is the same information that Beth was presenting just a moment ago about what are the needs of the children who come for child find. So the purple here, speech only, are children who are only being evaluated by a speech language pathologist, and that's typically just articulation and fluency needs. As you'll see, for young children, that's almost half of the screenings and evaluations that are done. That's a huge part of our population. The blue refers to children who are referred and evaluated for speech and specially designed instruction. Because communication is so integral to almost all aspects of early childhood development, if a child has a delay in behavior management, behavior and emotional regulation, there's almost always a language component to that. If a child has delays in learning, there's almost always a language component to that, because how we learn and how we show what we learn involves language. And so most of the children who are referred for Child Find will have a speech language therapist involved in some aspect of the evaluation. That little 34 up at the top are children who are evaluated for behavior only. So as we screened the child, we did not identify that there was a communication issue that needed to be evaluated, and they were evaluated just in the area of behavior. So we follow the same process that K-12 follows as we identify children with disabilities, but obviously there are a few differences for children who haven't attended school yet, for children this young. For example, we always ask the question, has this child had access and opportunity to learn the things that are expected? Well, when we talk about children in K-12, what we're talking about is, the question we're really asking is, has this child attended school consistently? Have they had access in school? And have they had access to content that is actually aligned with learning standards, right? Well, that we don't have the same kind of aligned curriculum that's available for children at age 3. So what does access and opportunity mean at that age? Well, we're looking at how functional the child is in the environment, in their natural environment, their home, their daycare, their preschool. What are they expected to be able to do? Has somebody actually taught them to do those things? And just a real quick example, every year we get a lot of concerns from parents because their child isn't able to write letters. They're not able to hold the pen and write letters. Sometimes what we find out is that a child's primary type of play is with electronics, and they don't have a lot of experience holding crayons or markers or pens. So we might see that that's a delay and make some suggestions, provide some ideas for things that they could do. But if a child hasn't had the opportunity to control a writing utensil, we wouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion that that was a disability. So we use that kind of problem-solving process in all of the areas that we're evaluating. We do provide intervention, just as teachers provide intervention in the classroom. We do that working with the parents, working with the daycare providers, again, in the natural environment of the child. When we talk about, when we get to the decision about whether needs exceed the program of general education, that's also a little bit different for children ages 3 to 5. And it's because so much education so many of the educational needs for young children can be well met in universally designed classrooms. So what a high-quality classroom can do for a lot of children is meet the needs of both children with special needs and children who are typically developing without a lot of extra tinkering. So that's a question that we deal with a lot. Even when we see a delay in a child, is this something that requires more than universal design? So we have a lot of conversation about that. When we're talking about discrepancy, instead of using academic standards, we're using the early learning standards and developmental benchmarks. And again, we might be concerned that a child can't write their name before they begin kindergarten, but in fact, it's within developmental norms. So if that's the only problem that a child has is that they're not writing their name, we wouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion that that's a disability. The last thing I wanted to just mention is that we do know, based on social science that's been going on since the late 1990s, that at the minimum, we can estimate that 25% of Iowa's children have had adverse childhood experiences that would actually be expected to impact their neurological development to such an extent that we would anticipate that they would have problems learning and problems regulating their behavior. We know that from the science. But what the science says is that this is, we would anticipate learning problems or behavioral problems unless there is a buffering effect that's provided from a positive, responsive adult in a safe environment. Well, that's just what preschool is. That's what preschool is. Preschool is an experience with a responsive adult who is in a safe and predictable environment. And so even though it's beyond the assignment of child find, because we are in homes so frequently, we see families all over the district, we also spend an awful lot of our time just trying to provide resources to families to make sure that they are aware of quality preschools that are available to them in the district. They're aware that there is some funding support, not just for the universal preschools in the district, but there are other funding supports available to families, and trying to make sure that they have access to those programs. Because that is the system of support. That is MTSS for young children. So we want to make sure that as many children as possible have access to those programs. Do you have any questions for us?
So what's the budget size of Access?
I don't know. Like, how much is our whole budget? Tracy, do you have any
I can get
ideas?
the numbers for you. When, at the agency, we
Yeah.
call early access Part C, because it's birth to 3, and it's a very different budget
Sure.
than
Yeah.
the Part B special ed, so I can get those numbers for you. They might have been in the packet that we had, when we presented last week over at Garner, but I'll pull the numbers for you and get that to you.
Just order of magnitude. You know,
Yeah.
The idea of early access is really to get out there and find those kids and do that early intervening. And we always talk about there's much more of a lower bar for kids to qualify to get early access. When you talk
Yeah.
about, just what are those predictive kind of developmental delays that kids could have, we're looking for kids that are preemies and are low birth weight. Those are kids who are going to qualify just automatically. And
Actually, sorry,
Oh, go
they
ahead.
actually changed that qualification. Just recently, unfortunately, we are actually sad about that they actually changed that qualification. You no longer automatically qualify just for prematurity.
Oh, okay.
So
So they're looking at other things.
They're
but that
looking
would
at
be
other
something
things.
that would
But
rise up that we're looking
We're
at.
looking
those
at
kids
children
and-
who either already, we know were born with a medical disability
Right.
or are at very high risk
Right.
for developing.
So it used to be that the prematurity was an automatic qualifier. Now you have to be like within, the number of weeks premature changed. So basically you have to be extremely premature to qualify or have had a medical condition while being.
Which in Iowa City is still a significant number.
It's still a
because of the
significant number.
university. We
Yeah.
have an awful lot of children who are
Yes,
who are miracle
absolutely.
babies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But we're sad about that because as providers, we know that even if you're 34 weeks, even if you're 33 weeks you spent time in a bay, that your neurological responses are high and all of that later on develops. And even if you were on forced air, that affects your throat and your breathing and your development, all of that. I mean, it all just trickles down and we all know that. And so we went and talked to the NICU nurses. We said, even if they're not qualifying now, send them later, don't wait. So,
So the idea for early access is really the lower bar, because you're really looking just to find them and get them really intervening.
Yeah.
Then when it comes to when they're turning 3, then that's when you're really looking at Part B services and really looking for those educational disabilities. And so that's why there's kind of a bit of a difference
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And you'll find that, you have kids that kind of qualify, and we said those early access, because we are looking for those, and then they flourish and they grow with that good predictable and support. And they wouldn't necessarily have an educational disability that would bring them automatically into Part B.
I would say too, the nice thing too about overlapping here is that we both programs use a developmental approach, and we're looking at building those building blocks that are the foundation for literacy and math in school. There's a unique sensitive window for the development of communication in the early years, and if we can hit those skills in early childhood, first of all, so much pliable, so much more plastic, and easy to remediate. So much harder to remediate those early communication and language skills once the child's in school. But then we've set the foundation for reading and math rather than having to remediate the delays in reading and math later on.
Right. Great.
The state has set some standards of kind of the number, the percentage of kids that we're supposed to be looking at. The interesting thing, it's not by, early access isn't by district, it's by county. And so what we find with early access is we're trying to hit that bar of finding enough kids. And we always seem to be running a little bit short, which is odd to us because in Iowa City it's a growing area. We're right here with the university and all of these kids are coming here to get these services, but I think the university is also keeping them a lot of times. And not necessarily advising that parents are always branching out and getting the early access services from Grantwood as well. And so we're always striving to make sure that we're continuing our relationships and talking with the university and trying to get those kids and provide those services.
Where's that bar set, Tina, what percent?
I can get you the percentage, you guys, you know what it is.
I don't.
It's a certain, it's in the AYP data that comes with our other special education data. There's a certain number that they want us to be finding for early access, 0 to 1, and then 0 to 3. And we're always, it seems like we're running a little bit shy of the goal of where we're supposed to be getting. So something we keep working on.
Statistically, is it pretty easy to predict what percent of that early access population will make it into the child, through the child find process, or is that so variable depending on?
When they turn 3.
Oh, that is a good question. I can tell you, I don't know that, I don't have the answer to that question. I can tell you of the children who are referred, the children who come from early access through the transition process, approximately 85% of them are identified as eligible individuals. But I don't know of the total number of children who go into early access, what's the percent that go on.
Because occasionally we'll have kids that'll be getting early access services, birth to 1, 1 to 2, but then they're growing and they're not at that level, and so they kind of exit on me before they get to the point that we're looking at Part B in age 3. And then the next question is, wow, and then how many of them do we see circling around again when they're in first or second grade? You know, are we catching again later in the system? So.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have some longitudinal.
Very educational, thanks.
Yeah, on your screening and evaluation page, you show 4 years worth of results and it starts high, goes down, goes back up. If we were to look at like a 10-year, a 15-year, how have the numbers reflected in that? Are they fairly consistent?
I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean if we went back for a full 10 years, would we see a different trend?
If this was expanded 10 years, would we be seeing a relatively high area, or did we come up and we're getting a momentary drop?
There is one piece of information that would alter that data significantly. The Grantwood AEA used to run what was called Child Check. I don't know if any of you remember that. It was kind of this early childhood time frame of bringing kids in, and you bring them into like a huge setting, and you go and you see an OT, a PT, a speech person, and they kind of run you through the system real quick, and they say, oh, your kiddo's good to go, and we don't really see anything that would qualify them there for services. That used to be on house, we at the agencies, and we would do that, and so that's where a lot of this happened. And that it was a repeat of services, and so Grantwood was always just trying to make sure, are we repeating services or do we have gaps? And that was a repeat of service. So, and it took a lot of professionals' time to do that, and so they we got rid of that service of having people come in to do those child checks. So that's you would see a spike during that time frame that we took away the child check, because those numbers would be increased.
But as far as numbers over the last 10 years or so, are they still pretty much the same, or are we going up because there's talk of the autism numbers are going to continue to
That is
rise?
a great question. I just don't have those numbers. I also would anticipate that we would have gotten a spike when Child Check was discontinued, but I don't have those numbers.
Okay.
But that would make sense if there's a higher prevalence, that we would see some reflection of that in the child find referrals. I just don't know.
And, you know, in here, and I've lost the page where you're talking about where you're encouraging play and things like that with the parents and stuff. Are you encouraging them to get outside and get down into the dirt and everything like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's Yeah, anytime I can, tell them to turn off anything electronic. I mean, I really try to honor, my side of town, where I am, it tends to be much more of a student section. And I have a great deal of number of our ELL learners. That's just kind of where my section is. So I have a very culturally diverse population, and I really honor whatever they are doing and what, where they are. But we use a real coaching model in the state. We've taken a lot of training in the coaching model, and so I'm using whatever they're using and where they are. But absolutely, just getting outside. We go into the community with families. Do you want to go to the park? Do you want to go shopping? Do you want to? I've gone to the doctor's office with them. Like, how can we make this a better transition someplace? So we go where they want to go. It's not just what our agenda is. It's what's going to work best for the family. So absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe a Christmas idea would just sort of poster would be a pencil with a bow on it.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. So Steve, you want to go talk to pre-K?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, so I'm Jay Beaver. I'm the early childhood and early childhood special ed support lead teacher with the district. So kind of oversee all the preschool programs, the gen ed side of things, and the special ed side of things for preschool. Just kind of want to give an overview of the programs we have going on in the district, some data that we've collected recently in the areas of math and literacy that our kids are achieving as we go along. So currently, district-wide, we have a couple different models we use for preschool. The majority of our preschools that we have are funded by the state through the statewide voluntary preschool program. And that's a state-run, state-mandated program that provides free preschool to any student that is 4 years old on or before the September 15th cutoff date. So currently we have 14 programs, and we're located in 10 elementary buildings. And those are the buildings that we're currently in this year. The 14 programs that are part of statewide voluntary preschool are half-day programs, so each of those programs offers a morning section and an afternoon section. So we actually have 28 sections of preschool between the morning and the afternoon. And have a pretty good distribution currently of buildings, kind of where they're located geographically across the district. And I'll talk a little bit later about some things we're looking at for next year as far as expanding this a little bit with what we have available to us next year. But currently for the statewide programs, these are the buildings that we are in. On this list, Alexander, Cornwall Central, Kirkwood, Penn, Shimmick, Twain have one program, and the other schools have two programs in them. So kind of where we have the space is kind of where we have our programs right now across the district for these statewide programs. Each of these programs, like I said, they offer 2 half-day sessions. So we have an AM preschool session that's a 7:55 to 10:45, and then our PM is 12 to 2:55. So both just a little shy of that 3 hours. We try to made that adjustment with the bell schedule change, and knowing we need to have time in between the two programs for teachers to have their break, their lunch break, and prep for the afternoon and so forth, getting kids out and getting new kids in. The PM preschool does not have a session on Thursday afternoons because of our early out. There just wouldn't be time to get the kids there and turn around and have them leave with the early out. So that's just a 4-day-a-week program currently. And we are looking potentially next year at adjusting the times a little bit, just because we do realize there's a disparity between the total hours you get in the morning versus the afternoon, because we don't have that Thursday afternoon session. So we are looking at ways we can adjust that time a little bit to make those a little bit more equal between the morning and the afternoon. This year our sessions serve 10 to 12 general education students that are funded through statewide, and then they have up to 5 students who are eligible for special education. So all of these programs are fully inclusive, blended programs with both gen ed and students eligible for special education. The 10 to 12 kind of depends on the school. We have higher demand in some of our locations. For instance, here, Borlaug is typically the first school that fills up when we open up our registration process. Coralville Central, Kirkwood are always full right away and have waiting lists, same with the North Liberty schools. So we do bump up those numbers a little bit in those schools to try to get some more students served. But right now, we're kind of looking at that 15-ish number as our max between the general education students and the special education students. And then every program we have, they're staffed with a teacher that's certified in both early childhood education and early childhood special education. And that's a state requirement that teachers have to carry that dual certification now, because we have to have inclusive programs, and so teachers have to have that dual certification. And then we start every program with one paraeducator into the classroom, and that is to meet state ratio guidelines for preschool. You have to have it's one adult for every 10 students when you look at the Iowa Quality Preschool Program Standards, which is the accreditation process that we have to go through with the state. So we always start with that one paraprofessional, and then as we add students and based on student needs, there might be a need to add additional support to meet the needs of the students. And then besides the statewide programs we also have shared visions programs. That's another grant through the state, and that is focused on providing preschool programs to students that are income eligible, so targeting those lower income families. So we have two of those programs. One of those is at Twain, and one of those is at Hills Elementary, and those have been there through that grant, I think, since 1995. We just re-upped that grant 2 years ago, so we have it now until through 2019. We'll be funded through that grant until we have to re-up the grant again. But the Shared Visions offers full-day programming for the students that are qualifying for that, and then Hills also has a wraparound component, and that's through a separate grant that the whole school is involved in, and we were able to fold preschool into that. So they actually offer services from 7 in the morning till 6 at night for those students that are eligible. Those two programs serve up to 20 students. The grant for the programs provides funding for 16 students at Hills and 14 students at Twain. So we make up the remaining spots with tuition paid families for those programs. So both those programs serve 20 students. And then we have one just straight tuition funded program, and that's at Horseman Elementary. Again, it's a full day program. It's the school day hours, 7:55 to 2:55. And we serve 20 students in that program. Those students are all tuition paid. We also have several students there, as well as the tuition spots at Twain and Hills that are on empowerment scholarships through Johnson County Empowerment for their tuition. Again, that program serves 20 students, and we do have, in that program, we do also have that inclusive model, so we do include students that are eligible for special education in that program as well. So roughly 15 to 17 gen ed students, and then 3 to 5 students that are eligible for special ed in that program. Kind of what we provide in our programs, all of our programs utilize a creative curriculum, and that's a state mandated curriculum for early childhood. We also, on top of that, we have provided a number of different supplemental curriculums to our programs. The creative curriculum is kind of a overall general framework of what a preschool classroom should look like, what you should have available in the classroom, what kids should be involved in. What we have kind of found as we've gone through it and implemented that across the district is it doesn't necessarily provide a lot of guidance on what to teach and how to teach it. And so we've adopted different curriculums for literacy, math, and social emotional skills that all the programs have and implement. And along with that, we have also started doing fall and kind of late winter screening for math, literacy, and writing with our preschool students. That's not something that's mandated by the state, but something that we wanted to start doing because the state does mandate that we do an assessment called GOLD, and that is part of creative curriculum. It's creative curriculum GOLD assessment. That's done 3 times a year. It's kind of an ongoing process, but 3 times a year you have to go in and indicate where students are developmentally in the different domains of literacy and math and learning and language and motor and those different developmental domains. What we kind of found was that first checkpoint for that assessment doesn't have to happen until mid-November. So we weren't identifying kids that might be falling behind until we were 3 months into the school year, and we kind of decided as a group that we wanted data a little bit earlier in the year to identify those kids and not wait those first 3 months to know who might be needing a little more intervention. So we started doing a math literacy and writing screening tool in the beginning of the year to start identifying those students that might need some additional support. Again, it's taught by, programs are all taught by certified teachers. All of our programs are inclusive, fully inclusive, so we have kids, general education students on individual education programs, and all of our preschools are accredited through the Iowa Quality Preschool Program Standards, and that's something that when the state rolled out the statewide voluntary preschool program law, they developed their standards that they expect all programs to meet to qualify for that funding. And then just a couple slides on some data that we started to pull this year, just kind of looking, now that we're doing that screening tool, we kind of wanted to see progress students have, and I have graphs of this too. I put it in the board docs, but if you want a paper copy of it, you can take one. I was having a little difficulty getting those graphs to transfer over to my PowerPoint the other day. So, but just numbers wise, this will show for literacy that beginning of the year screener. So this is done in right away at the beginning of the school year, in the first 3 weeks of the school year. The students are screened in literacy, and then we do one of, again, late January, early February, so it's not technically spring, but it's a 2-time-a-year screener, so just kind of showing the growth we're seeing across ethnicities. I think the one thing, when I was looking at this data and looking at the Hispanic population and seeing that's kind of the lower amount of growth that we see, majority of our kids that are Hispanic that come into our programs are coming from Spanish-speaking only homes. So they're coming in, this might be their first exposure to English. So we kind of expect that literacy score, to be a little bit lower for them, but they are making growth as they go through the year, which is encouraging to see. And then the same for math, which is on the flip side of that handout I just passed out. Seeing good growth across all the different ethnicities, and these two at 100%, we have about 1 or 2 kids, per that ethnicity group, which is why that is at 100%.
Jay, does this include the kids that are there for special education as well?
Yes, yeah, I did not pull out, and we only do this on 4-year-olds. So students that are in special education that are still 3 do not receive this screening tool. This is just for 4-year-olds. So it's not every student that's in special education, but the 4-year-olds. It does include, and I did not pull those out. So.
Is this the first year you did it, or do you have history?
This is the second year we've done the screening tool. It's part of the math and literacy supplemental curriculum we adopted. It's called Get Set for School. It has the screening tool as part of it, so we started using that last year just because it aligns with the curriculum that we're using. And so this is just the second year. So this will be the data from the first year. We'll update this at the end of this year when we get more data.
And is it possible to track them when they get into kindergarten?
Yep, that's the next.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was going to show you. So we did look at that this year. For the first time, we pulled the FAST proficiency data for kids that attended district preschool programs and kids that did not. So the blue are the students that did not attend a district preschool program or did not attend preschool at all. And then the orange is the students that attended a district preschool, and this would be the fall screener. So when they came into kindergarten this year, kind of how their proficiency percentage was coming into kindergarten.
Are you going to be able to keep track of that, or is it a one-year thing?
No, we're going to continue to keep track of that.
Great.
This is kind of our first year to do that, and it kind of helps us see across the different ethnicity groups where that performance is. I think the significant thing from here is we do see a pretty significant difference, even though this is still kind of low compared to the other ethnicity groups. The difference between the ones that did not attend a preschool and the ones that attended district preschool, I think it's pretty significant.
Well, and it's some type of the Pacific Islanders.
Right, again, it's
that didn't
again,
attend
it's,
preschool did better
right.
than
So
the
this
ones
is
that did.
there's 4.
Okay.
So out of the 4 that attended district preschool, 1 of them was not proficient on FAST. So that's why I dropped to 75%. I was trying to figure out a different way to show that, but I couldn't quite get that going. So that's why those 2 are a little bit different. But that kind of shows.
And on the and this is kind of, and excuse me, it's kind of coming from left field, but on the Hispanic kids that, you know, we're testing them in their foreign language, we ever test them in their native language to see exactly, you know, is there, you know what I mean? You have a, it's like taking English-speaking kid and testing them
Right.
on Spanish.
Right, so
They're
we do not,
They're not gonna, unless they're in a Spanish professor's household, but is there anything that we do just to make sure that those kids are, you know, they're
Right.
not showing any?
we do not do that, a screening in their language. And we also, there's not ELL services available in preschool. It's not funded through the state to provide ELL services in preschool. So we don't have, you know, those resources at our disposal, so.
Sink or swim on that.
Mhm. But I do think, you know, when we're looking at kids who might have been referred to the AEA, they will sometimes do, somebody go, have an interpreter go out and do those assessments.
But you get to
in
the
the
higher
native
stakes
language.
decisions about determining eligibility and those kind of things, we are very much more cognizant of looking
Yes.
at the assessments that we're using and trying to make sure that there are considerations for the language, so.
So those are pretty impressive data. I suppose some of it could be inherent, right? Because I suppose the family and parents are looking for daycare. But you showed the growth too, so.
Mhm.
It seems pretty impressive, I don't know, right? I mean,
We think so too.
Is the tool that you're using, have they been tested to see how well they work with first population of kids? Have they been tested with any validity that these screening tools that we use work with all our different populations?
The screening tool has not. The gold assessment that we use that's a nationally norm referenced and has those, that background to it. The screening tool is not, that I'm aware of. Fast would be.
I think the thing to monitor over time now that we've moved to the FAST data too is to look at what our literacy assessment is saying, you know, at the end of their PK opportunity and match that to their FAST then fall data. Because, you know, our data looks a little bit better in the spring, but we would typically think that would happen anyway with the possibility of some summer slide. So is there summer slide, or are we not kind of measuring exactly what they're gonna be measuring come the springtime, I think, or the fall? That's something for us to consider.
And the skills that the screening tool we use in preschool measures for literacy are a lot more than what they measure for beginning of the year in FAST. It's just broken down to a lot more different skills, so it's letter identification, sounds. I'm gonna look to the two preschool teachers back there to maybe help me out here, but it looks at a lot more different areas of literacy than what the beginning of the year FAST does.
The
So it's
screening
not a direct
assessments
comparison.
that were created with the curriculum really were to kind of help you know if the students are getting the curriculum from fall until spring. As Jay continues to collect the data, then eventually you're going to kind of create your own Iowa City norm because you're going to have that longitudinal data that'll tell us how the different subgroups are responding to that instruction and that curriculum.
So we're doing
eventually
that,
you'll end up
we
with that data.
do work on establishing our norms across the district because we use that screening data. This year we started the MTSS process in preschool as well, the multi-tiered system of support to identify the kids that might be needing extra intervention in literacy and math. So we're starting to roll that process out in preschool as well this year. So that screening data is one piece of information we're using for that to make sure we're catching the kids early in the school year.
Do you know if the full day is more effective than the half day?
I did not look at that, but that would be something to look at.
Intuitively, you'd think so, but you never know, right? I mean,
And, you know, I would say when you look at a full-day program, it kind of depends on the structure of the day, what that full-day program looks like. Typically, a full-day program, a lot of the instruction happens in that morning half-day time, and then there's lunch, then there's rest time, depending on how long that lasts. It kind of just depends on the structure of the preschool classroom and how long those things last.
good old rest time.
How much of the day is more, that childcare piece versus that instructional piece could affect that.
Jay, is it anticipated that we're missing out on families who may have to work during the day, or the transportation's an issue when it comes to half-day versus full-day?
I'm sure that is an issue for a lot of families, yes. Transportation is not something that's funded through the statewide. They say that, yes, you can. The state says, yes, you can transport preschoolers, but we're not going to provide you extra funds to do that. So we've kind of looked at a little bit of that. But
So who's funding the wraparound services in those? Is that a grant or?
it is a grant, and I don't know if it's an extension of the Shared Visions grant or if it's something separate. Thank you, yeah.
Is that something that could be expanded to other schools?
It's possible. The Shared Visions grant, and I think the wraparound grant is similar. A big part of the grant that we have to write to get that, we have to show need in that specific attendance area. So for areas like Twain and Hills, there's definitely that need. Hills is pretty easy to write because there's really no other options for childcare,
Right.
Without leaving your community. But it's a pretty extensive grant to show really specific need for that level of funding for those kids.
I would think that that would make a difference in what Brian said. The difficulty for working parents, if you can do the wraparound services in more places.
And part of that too would be, how that wraparound is supported, if it's a district-supported wraparound program, or if it's like we do with the before and after-school programs, where some of those are operated by rec centers
How is
and
it at
those sort of
Hills?
things.
Is it the before and after school program, or is it an outside agency that does the wraparound? Or is it the actual preschool?
Not for pre-K. Pre-K, in Hills, the pre-K wraparound is part of the K-6 wraparound. It's all one program. So the pre-K is not separate for the wraparound
Okay,
piece.
so it's their school
It's
program.
their before and after-school
Before and
program.
after-school
Yeah, and
program.
then preschools are just part of that.
Is there any difference between the PM proficiency of kids versus the AM proficiency?
I didn't look at that specifically, so I don't know. I don't think that, as we go through our process of identifying kids that might not be proficient, I don't think there's been a significant difference between the AM and PM kids. As we look at our data in our PLC groups in preschool, I haven't noticed a significant difference in that. I didn't pull that out specifically.
I'm just thinking it might be interesting, a lot of our bell change time was based a lot on early morning learning for little ones. And then we have kids coming in at noon, which for my kids that's nap time, so you're not gonna get anything out of my kids. So I'm just thinking like, how much is those afternoon kids getting compared to those kids who have 8-10 hours of sleep and ready to go?
Like definitely, that's something that'll be easy to separate out and pull that, so definitely can look at that too.
On the funding, so the Shared Visions funds Twain and the main part of the Hills program, and the tuition fund is the MAN program. Where's the funding come from the remaining programs?
It's from the state, so they have the statewide voluntary preschool program, which was a state law that they passed, I want to say about 2010-ish, maybe a little bit before that. And so they fund 0.5 of the 1.0 funding that K-12 receives.
Where's the rest of
That's
That's how we're able to offer half day.
yeah, that's why we
it?
have. And then the law stipulates that you have to provide a minimum of 10 hours for that funding. We provide 12.
I guess part of my question is, do we spend any general fund money on our preschool programs at all?
Not that I'm aware of. We're
So
funded.
really, our ability to offer more of any of this is outside our control to a large degree, right? I mean, it depends on funding from elsewhere.
Right, but the funding is based on enrollment of the kids. So we follow the same, we have to send our enrollment in on October 1st, just like K-12, and that determines our funding for the following school year.
I would
So-
say it is our desire to grow our PK programs in the district. And so if we can get the kids, our ability to put them in buildings is the hard part. We just are lacking the space.
Right. I mean, we're willing to grow, and I think we have the interest, especially in some of those schools that I mentioned earlier that fill up quickly. We have, Coralville Central, for instance, we still have probably 8 to 10 or so kids that are on waiting lists to get into that program this year. Kind of the same for Kirkwood. We still have several on the waiting list here at Borlaug.
2 questions about how we fill those programs. One, how do we inform people about the availability of pre-K?
Well, it's on our website. It's on there actually now for next year. We do press releases. We have flyers that go out to all the buildings. We try to get flyers out to like the neighborhood centers and those sort of organizations.
Do we do anything, I don't know if we can, but with faith-based organizations, do we do anything? Not sure.
We haven't.
I don't know if we're able to.
Yeah, we haven't done that.
But then the other question is that are the spots filled first come, first serve, or is there a metric that we use to, say socioeconomic or
Kind of a little bit of both. So it is, our registration's all handled online now. And it opens on a specific date at a specific time. And then as the families register, it timestamps it.
Which brings the next question. I know that we have a lot of our families that we know in the district, like 95% have internet access. I'm curious when it comes to online, do we have any availability like at, say, a public library or something where we have any outreach or neighborhood center outreach trying to help people navigate through that? We do. Okay. And I really don't know.
We do, and we have the ESC, we always, that's always said, if you need support or help, we're there at the ESC. We have the computer lab set up there for people to register. The one thing I didn't include in here, and I'm not sure why I forgot, but as part of the statewide program, we are required to have community partners.
Okay.
So we have 5 community preschools that also offer statewide preschool programming. And 3 of those are through neighborhood centers in Johnson County. So they have one at Pheasant Ridge Neighborhood Center, one at Broadway Neighborhood Center, and then they have a program that is housed at Grantwood Elementary. So it's in our elementary, but they operate the program. So they kind of have their outreach through that as well. And we're constantly kind of trying to think of ways, make sure that we are reaching out to those families that might not have access to the information that we're sending out, or
Right, and that's what I'm getting at.
yeah.
So.
I mean, that's a,
So is preschool free for all of our kids? I mean, for the half-day
Yes.
ones that the
Yeah.
state
Yes.
provides, even with our community partners?
yes. The community partners, so the law says you have to provide up to 10 hours minimum to get your funding. If community partners want to provide more than that, they can provide more than that, and then it's kind of up to them if the statewide will cover that extra. If not, then they might charge their own tuition on top of that.
So a
So-
parent could think that they're getting that, but they may have an additional fee.
Right, which is the centers that operate that are communicating that to the family. So one of our community partners is Handicare, and so they're a full day wraparound. They're open from 7 in the morning to 6 at night. Part of their day for 4-year-olds is the statewide piece. So some kids might just go to Handicare for that 2.5 hour. I think there's programs are 3 hours. Might just go for that 3-hour statewide piece, and that's it. Other kids might take advantage of that whole day, so they get that 3 hours funded through statewide, and then Handicare just the full day tuition to cover. Parents can opt to pay that to cover the rest of the day if they want to take advantage of both the preschool and then the child care wraparound.
And Jay, can I just add that in those centers, the centers that are community partners, the centers that provide full-day wraparound, also do work with parents if they are eligible for any kind of child care subsidy or any kind of subsidy at all. Within the centers, they make sure that they help parents fill out that paperwork, submit that paperwork, make sure that they're funded to the extent that they can be.
Amy, do you have any sense of, if the constraint right now is space in buildings, do you have any sense of how many more kids would be enrolled if we had more space?
I don't have a sense because we don't know what
Yeah.
those barriers with transportation or only being half-day, how many more we could get. But I mean, if we're at about 385, 400 kiddos that we're serving,
We are at just general education 4-year-olds. We are at 403. To be exact.
and just knowing our typical class is anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 kids, there's a lot of kids that we're not capturing right now. That sounds bad.
Is space really the constraint?
It really primarily is. I mean,
We get
we're
20 extra kids on the wait list at Corval Central.
there's not a classroom space there to open up a second
I thought there was a Kirk
classroom space.
Kirkwood, there's one room now, but Corval Central, there's no rooms right now.
For those places that are full too, we do offer parents opportunities to go to other buildings if they
Right,
can
you're
get
not.
kiddos there.
you know, So the one thing with statewide is it's not constricted by boundaries. It's not even constricted by district. A student, we could, if we wanted to, have kids from Solon or Tiffin, come to our preschools as well. We pretty much don't do that because we want to make sure we're getting our own kids. And since we seem to be filling up our classrooms pretty well with our own kids, so we don't open that up. But parents can, you know, if you're on a waiting list at Coralville Central, you can opt to go to a different preschool district if that preschool does have space.
You want to talk about some opportunities for next year?
Recommendations.
So we are opening up a new program at Weber Elementary next year. They recently had additions added on, so we're able to have a classroom space there with the potential of possibly 2. We're going to kind of see what the interest is before I fully commit to equipping 2 classrooms, but we're definitely going to have 1 new classroom there because they have the space. And when we kind of look, right now, Borlaug here is our only building on the west side of Iowa City that has preschool. And so when we kind of looked at their current enrollment and the breakdown, it was about a third of the kids that attend Borlaug preschool are Borlaug kids, a third are Horn kids, and a third are Weber kids. So because we have the space at Weber, we're definitely going that way. It'd be great to have one at Horn too, but knowing that they're stretched to the limit right now, that's not going to happen for next year. So we'll definitely have another opportunity over here at Weber. And then another change that's happening for next year is we are moving our 2 preschool programs that are currently at Wendell Johnson at the university. We are going to move those to the new Hoover out on American Legion Road next year and be part of the Longfellow School while they're there next year. We've kind of made that decision, kind of been talking about it for a little while. Those programs have been part of Wendell Johnson for a long time, and it has been a really good partnership we've had with them. The biggest thing that is missing with having programs there is the kids that attend those programs. One is kind of focused on communication, students with significant communication delays, and the other one is more of a modified program serving kind of our lower functioning, our 3-year-olds that might be developmentally at an 18-month level in those 2 classrooms. The biggest problem with that is being in an off-site program, they have no access to same-age peers. So there's no opportunity for inclusion in those programs, and that's really not what's best for kids to do. The other,
Where's Wendell Johnson located?
it's right by the hospital. It's right kitty corner to Kinnick Stadium. And we do have some general education peers that attend one of the afternoon programs there, but it's been an ongoing challenge to get general education peers there. I think I'm not exactly sure why, the location or people just aren't familiar with what Wendell Johnson Preschool is. But we really want to make sure that the kids that are attending those programs have the same opportunities as everybody else in the district to be around, have the opportunity to be in programs with their same age peers and experience that. And then the other piece too is getting those kids in their neighborhood schools. We think that's important that, you know, as we continue to expand our preschools and get them in more buildings, we want all the kids to have the opportunity to be in their neighborhood school. Just because you might have this delay shouldn't mean you have to go to this special offsite program if we can meet those needs.
Is that a problem at all, though? People used to go in downtown, so they have to get themselves all the way out to Scottsbluff.
Not necessarily, because kids in preschool that are eligible for special education, if we do not have a preschool program in their neighborhood school, and we are saying that in order to, if you're a Horn attendance area is your neighborhood school, and we are saying that you're eligible for special education, and in order for you to receive those services, you have to go to Borlaug, then we provide transportation. So most of the kids that attend Wendell Johnson right now are being transported already, because it's not a neighborhood school, so that would continue with the programs being located at the new Beaver. But the other change with that is the program right now at Wendell Johnson that is primarily focused on students who have severe articulation delays. That program is going to just become like all of our other preschool programs. I mean, it's going to serve general education students and then a variety of students for special education. And the students that we're currently serving there with the communication delays will be able to attend their neighborhood schools moving forward.
So what would ideal state be for pre-K? I think we all think we have it in our minds, but
Ideally, be in every building in the district.
would it be universal all day pre-K or no? Or
Starting at age 3.
Yeah.
With transportation
With
provided
Transportation.
yeah.
and wraparound services.
so then another simple question. This one's for Steve, really. So don't
Okay.
worry. But what would the cost be between today and universal all day pre-K?
Absent state funding, I had a chance to talk to Craig about that today. He couldn't put a projection together immediately for it, but he said that that would be, right now, very prohibitively expensive for the district.
No, we won't do it, I mean, Chris's point, I mean, but what's the price tag?
Yeah, he didn't know off the top of his head. He couldn't figure that out right
It'd be
away.
nice to know what the type of dollars you're talking. If Ideal State's all day universal, what's the delta between today
So,
in funding and then also in capacity? And then, is that a legislative priority? So the follow-up question would be, is this the biggest lever to grade 3 literacy, or is it something
Right.
else?
right.
So the other thing I
The-
posed this morning is, would we rather go after 1.0 4-year-olds or have 0.53 and 0.5 4-year-olds?
Exactly.
So then the
Good
flip is, what's right now the anticipated strain on our general fund that will come from the 3rd grade retention, the ELI, and how does that balance with?
Well, is that proposal, which is already in place, if this is a bigger deal, we're not telling that story,
Right,
right?
right.
I mean,
And then just, at IASB, with the ledge priorities for the IASB and the delegate assembly, there was definitely focus on pre-K, and we've been part of that, banging that drum for a while.
Are they talking about 3-year-olds or just 4-year-olds?
3-year-olds, yeah.
No, I had heard that there was some funding through every student succeeds act for pre-K. Is there some new funding through that?
There's some language in there around how we need to serve PKers that are homeless.
usually it's not-
But no funding.
But not
No
funding.
funding.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't help.
I think it'd just be useful to know, are we talking, it's probably like $5 million or something, right? I mean, $8 million.
Yeah, it'd be a lot, because remember Amy's observation about our incoming kindergarten class and then the delta between how many kids are being served and those that aren't. And then back to Tasha's comment earlier that if it's gonna work, we need to look at full day with wraparound, with transportation. And those are the things those are the elements, if you're looking for a high participation rate, you need to have each of those 3 elements in place.
So the same way that we focused on transportation for kids with transportation barriers, what if we look at kids who have the highest opportunity gaps and just tried to get all of them? What would it, again, the delta between 400 and 1,000, there's a lot of people that pay for preschool here.
Yeah, right.
So we want kids to come to school right with the pre-K.
I think the problem is that they're all linked together.
Yeah.
And it's not just the transportation issue, because even if we could get them in, if they're not funded, then just being delivered to the door isn't the problem. It's actually paying for the program once they get to the door.
Right.
That's the problem. And then I think Latasha brought up a great issue earlier, which is that although we don't have the data to back it up, there's a presumption that we have a large number of people who are choosing not to participate because a half-day increment does not work with their personal schedule.
Gotcha.
And so, absent the ability to solve all 3 of them simultaneously, it's tough to attack just one of them.
Yeah, I think
I think we'd be talking about 2,000 kids. If we're talking about all 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, then
There you go.
in this district, you're talking about
Yeah.
2,000 kids. And these kids right now, to get 400 in, they're only going half a day. If you're talking all day, you're also doubling the number of teachers and the
Right.
number of space you need. So you quadrupled your goal.
Exactly.
Not
Okay.
just doubled it, so.
I mean, if our direct costs are like 100 million divided by 13 grade, I mean, you spend 7, 8 million at grade level, right? It
Sure.
depends what you're paying today, but it'd just be nice to have a few of those. It'd be a legislative priority, right? It's not gonna,
And all of us who have paid for daycare know that daycare is extremely expensive. So,
College.
no surprise there. But would there be a lower, for those families that can afford to pay for daycare for the wraparound, could we charge them? Could there be a
Interesting,
lower
Craig and I were
cost?
doing research on that this afternoon. There is an opportunity for us. We haven't done enough, we need to do a little bit more digging on it, but we started talking to some other school districts out there today. Our nutrition services program operates as an enterprise fund. So it's a standalone, right? We don't push general funds into it. It doesn't push money back into the general fund. So it stands alone as an enterprise fund. And some of the other districts out there that offer daycare, which is a combination in their districts of both the pre-K educational program and what we're talking about as wraparound services, operate that under a daycare as an enterprise fund. So it stands alone by itself, just like school nutrition does. It collects state and federal dollars, like Jay was talking about, and those would flow into that program. But then they charge tuition, if you will, I don't know what other term you would call it, but they charge for the services for the parents, and the parents essentially are paying for the day minus the time that's covered by the state. So there are other districts out there right now that are doing that using an enterprise fund. We just didn't have enough time to gather more information on that today.
I think parents would appreciate any break they can get on daycare, and I mean, if there was an opportunity to have, 2.5 hours of the day funded by the state and the parent didn't have to pay, boy.
It still comes back to a space issue, because even let's take one of your PK examples though, here, Borlaug Elementary, those morning kids want to stay now, so now we need space for them in the afternoon, now that afternoon class isn't here.
It's one challenge at a time, right? The funding's gonna be the biggest constraint, but it'd just be nice to understand.
One of the reasons half day was because that's what the state funds, but then we were able to double the number of kids that we were serving with the space that we had, both the general education students and not overloading classrooms with a high number of students eligible for special education. We can kind of even that out a little bit too.
As a teacher during this program, I taught in both full day and half day programs, and I think it's a very efficient way to educate kids with this half day system, because we don't look at it as daycare, we're looking at it as pre-K prep. And our goals are very specific, we're very efficient with our time. And the thing with that full day program, and it does reach other kids, it reaches more kids because it provides that opportunity, but you're losing a lot of time to lunch and rest time. And we found that really wasn't as efficient, so when we have parents that ask us about that, I can honestly say that I think we get done in 2.5 hours what we used to get done in, basically 5 hours, because we're very efficient. And we have specific goals, we have these very specific curriculum goals, and we're very outcome focused on what we want to do so that we mesh up with kindergarten, and we get our kindergarten, pre-K kids ready for kindergarten. So, I think it's an efficient, cost-effective way to serve a lot of students.
So one question about funding, which over to my colleague for this question, but so say our lovely governor decides to give us those saved dollars. What is that, if that turns around, because we may know in a couple of weeks, if we have that commitment to pre-K in our community, because having, 300 to 400 students that came that were not, and then looking at our proficiency numbers, that we know this trickles for years and on beyond outside our doors.
Right.
Is there any, I guess it's a board discussion too, like, are we committed to taking some of those dollars over the however long this lasts to invest in preschool for kids?
The answer is you can.
Okay.
So that definitely becomes a potential for us. One of the questions that Craig and I didn't get answered today was, in that enterprise fund, what is the role of capital funding in that? So we've got to get that question answered. We've got some emails out to see if we can get some answers from folks on that. So that was a question that we didn't get answered today that's on our radar.
Well, I'm going to suggest this, so the next education committee is February, right? I wonder if we can come back with a little more of this financial.
What we'll try to do is I made a note here, we can get an FAQ together and actually get that out in draft form to you, and then see what additional questions you have, so we can try to get all those answered before we come back to the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we can go back and forth electronically and see what other questions you have.
I just think we should, they're great results, I think, so we should be sharing it. And Steve, it also makes me think at the next legislative meeting, perhaps we should just share these results, because there was a lot of questions for anyone who was there. There's a lot of questions about, the summer programming and that stopped the slide but didn't help progress, right? And so there's a lot of questions about what do we do and what do we see and what are the results. This you could pretty much point to, it made a difference. It wasn't just it made a difference. I just think it'd be useful. Maybe to review that with them.
Well, Mary Masher's been a great champion for us.
No, I think everybody
So making
gets it.
sure that, but giving her ammunition
Then you
makes
got,
a huge difference.
this chart right here is pretty powerful, I think, and your growth chart was pretty powerful.
And if there's space limitations, that should be taken up with the next FMP discussion.
Yeah, we didn't have it in there right now, because again, without the state funding for the actual students, once they come in, it's one of those kinds of situations where we could build it, but we can't afford to staff it. So part of the rationale is, and we've been asking for this now for years from the state legislature, is at what point do you actually start funding at greater than 0.5, and when do you start adding transportation? Because those are the two things that we saw as the biggest barriers. Definitely facilities, but absent the ability to get them there and absent the ability to hire staff to teach them, we didn't put the facilities in because we didn't have those other two pieces.
Well, step one is get our capacity right, just period, so,
Right.
I mean, right, I mean, that'd be step 0, I guess, and
Yeah.
then you can add.
The reverse is you have the funding to do it, but no space to do it. So,
The big barrier with the state right now and getting them convinced about preschool was the carryover funds statewide last year were pretty high for preschool. So a lot of districts are not
Not spending it.
spending their money. I think it was around 22 million across
Yeah.
the state was the carryover.
Well, that's not good.
Ours was only 58.
Yeah, ours was nothing.
Yeah, ours was the smallest in compared across the UEN districts as far as our carryover. So it's kind of, going to the legislature and saying, we want to do this, and then they're saying, well, you're not spending, across the state, you're not spending the money that we're giving you to
We'll be a
spend.
lead model.
So we're spending it.
Yeah, lead
We're
model.
utilizing ours as much as we can, so.
Jay, if you would add to this graph right here, maybe the special ed subgroup and show kind of where they were and the growth that you've seen, if you share that. Because really, closing the gap with our Black population, Hispanic, and our special ed, it's about closing the gap for those. And so if you think about preschool and early access, really is about finding those kids that are going to be at risk. And that's where we need to close the gap, and that's what preschool is really helping about. So I would add that as a little subgroup on your data if you're going to share that with other people.
All right, this is great. Any other questions, discussion? Otherwise, we'll come back to it in February's next one. And you can answer the questions when we got them, but
Yep, we'll start pushing those out.
I think the question we'll come back to is this the biggest lever against everything else we're doing? All right, anything else for tonight? All good, Ken? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Lori's got the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.